Hello, good evening out there in Raiderland. This is the first of hopefully many takes that I'll be able to share and perspectives as a Raider fan. I've been a long time Raider fan. Uh, my first time ever doing anything live, so might be a few hiccups, but I'm going to just jump right into it. When I heard that Kahlil Mack was holding out of camp, a few things came to mind. One is that it has always been traditionally difficult for Raiders to get contracts. And I look at Reggie McKenzie on that. If you go back even to Derek Carr, there are many times when people are due money and McKenzie is always playing hardball. He's been doing that all the way back in his days as a Green Bay Packer. His priority is to get the best deal that he can for the organization. He's always shown that to be the case. So, right off the bat, when you come to the table, if it's not to talk about contract restructuring or something of that nature, I would not say the Raiders have always been diligent about stepping up in the way that other teams do when it comes to rewarding good behavior, good players. And that's just a fact. That is borne out by history. That doesn't mean that I think that Reggie McKenzie is a bad uh, manager or anything of that nature. I just think that's his way. And if you look long enough, you're going to see that being the case. Second, because they play hardball, it doesn't surprise me that back in February they put an offer out there to Kahlil Mack and his agent that said, this is the neighborhood in which we're looking at. That's his way. They want to get the jump and the upper hand and read somebody's indicators as to how amenable they are to that. And I think that's exactly what happened. I think that's been his approach. The problem is that Kahlil Mack has a very good agent. And that agent knew the value of his client. And he wasn't just going to bite on what was put on his plate. Now, I want to go back a little bit more. Let's go back into the idea of appearances. Let's look at it from Kahlil Mack's side, and then we're going to look at it from the Raiders side, and then we're going to look at it from John Gruden's side, and so on and so forth. Because I think a lot of misinformation is out there, and there's a lot of assumptions out there that I just don't think pass the smell test. So let's go into the first historical context. You have a quarterback that's coming up, and you're looking at a contract, and you think this man has developed, and this is going to be our quarterback we're writing for the future. Now, I'm a big, big Derek Carr fan. I cannot think of a better quarterback that we could have in terms of his character, his ethic, his personality, his honesty, his accessibility, his talent, his drive than Derek Carr. I'm ride or die with Derek Carr. I've never seen a better Raider quarterback in the years that I've been a Raider fan. And that goes all the way back to when I was first a Raider fan. My first Raider hero was Marcus Allen. So that's how far back I ride. All that said, when you go and you look at your quarterback and that contract, you have to look ahead at who else is coming down the pipe. They have Derek Carr, they have Gabe Jackson, they have Kahlil Mack. Soon they're going to have Amari Cooper. Those are just your marquee players, and I wouldn't even put Gabe Jackson in that conversation. But in terms of the order of things, that's how it was going. Now, when you do Derek Carr and his contract, you have to be looking ahead at your cap. You have to be looking ahead at your situation for your other players. You're going to have to forecast how you're going to account for the most critical players and how you're going to prioritize them. And this is where I feel like messages get sent, because imagine you're Kahlil Mack and you see Derek Carr get this much money. Okay? That's a sign of somebody who is produced and feels like they have been recognized for that. Not only that, but they've also been invested in. The company or the team is investing in them and saying, we believe in you. We're putting this money and this faith in you to go out and carry our team. No problem with that. And I'm sure Kahlil Mack was excited about that as well, because that's a good sign. If you do well, you are rewarded, you are recognized. Then comes Gabe. Now, here is the problem. When Gabe gets his contract, Kahlil starts to see that pot is starting to get smaller and smaller. The truth of the matter is, the next person they should have talked to was Kahlil Mack, not Gabe Jackson. Gabe Jackson comes after. That whole process was inverted. So now that that is done, and now there's more money committed, that's less for him. And that should never have been the case, first off. Secondly, when you do that, and that player knows, and that agent knows, wait a minute, we're not going to be looking at top money with these people. When the Raiders come back and Reggie takes that approach and tells the agent or Kahlil, this is the neighborhood we're thinking, they already know. They already know what's going on. They've seen the tendency of how the Raiders are when it comes to contracts and rewarding people for good performances, for good character, and so on and so forth. Because even if you look at Derek Carr's contract, Derek Carr had a great attitude about the situation and a great approach, but the Raiders didn't just jump into it and come up to the table. I mean, there was no better character or player on that team than Derek Carr. And the second best player and character on that team, if you could put them side by side, was Kahlil Mack. Impeccable. Great attitude, great motor, great teammate, great leader. He was never a problem in that team. And when people say he's generational, they're absolutely right. Absolutely right. You could get someone with a lot of talent and a lot of baggage. You can get someone with a little talent and a lot of character. But when you mesh them and you get somebody that is that good, that is being compared with the likes of Von Miller, that is up there winning Defensive Player of the Year award. Now, granted, J.J. Watt was injured that year, but still, that's elite. And you don't just trip and find those kind of people. You definitely get lucky. So that's always been the Raiders' approach. As long as I can remember, they were either making stupid deals or they were making hardball deals. And that's the truth. So when they come to his agent and they float this offer, they were ready. They knew it was coming. Now, you can look at John Gruden, and I'm going to get into him and where I think he fits into this, just knowing what I know about John Gruden. But I really think it starts out with the Raiders' organizational approach to paying anybody money. They're tight-fisted. They're not afraid to play hardball, and they're not afraid to give you the impression that you are expendable. You can call that putting on a poker face or whatever. I do not believe that Kahlil Mack had as big of a hand in this as people think. I honestly believe that his agent said, you need to just step away from this, let me handle it. I will handle this organization. You go out, you do your training, you do you take care of things. It's going to be hard at times. You're going to have a thick skin, but you're going to have to trust me. I know these guys, I know how they like to play, and I know my client. Just stay out of it. Even if you miss it, even if your friends are texting and calling, I need you to trust me, let me take care of it. When there's something significant coming on, then let's talk about it. But this is going to be a long, drawn-out process. I know these guys. I think that is why Kahlil Mack isn't calling people back, why he's not taking calls, and why maybe the agent isn't, because the agent is playing his own form of hardball. Now, that's what I think happened. I think Kahlil Mack had a very good agent with a very good reading of the situation and a reading of his client and his client's value. Now, let's look at Kahlil Mack, the player. Kahlil Mack, incredible player. But I'm going to tell you that year one was his development. He was learning the ropes, learning all of these things, and he progressed at an incredible rate. But his production that year wasn't all that high. He wasn't full motor yet. He wasn't knocking down quarterbacks like bowling pins. Year two, the year, his best year, he was lights out, awesome. But so was Derek Carr, and so was Amari Cooper. That was the year that they were a broken ankle away from, at very least, the AFC Championship. Because I tell you, they would have destroyed the Texans. They would have embarrassed and humiliated the Texans. They would have made it to the AFC Championship. Now, would they have won? Don't know. They very well could have been on a hot hand and ended up in the Super Bowl. I wouldn't have been surprised. And most people wouldn't have until Indianapolis. You know, the one time that Donald Penn allowed a sack was the one time that year that our dreams ended. Sad freak accident. It really was. And most of you know that. Year 3, he comes back. By then, Kahlil Mack is being double teamed. By then, defenses are scheming against him, chip blocks, all these things. They largely took him out of games, entire games. That means that there are times in games where we lost, where we needed to get to that quarterback on third down, or we needed to get that stop on third down, and he didn't do it. And that's just the truth. He had production, but they only came in certain games where the offenses were more vulnerable. That's why you would see Brock Osweiler getting sacked all them many times. Okay, that wouldn't have happened with Peyton Manning the year before. It just wouldn't. There's no question on that. The sheriff could read a defense and get the ball out. Brock Osweiler wasn't that. He got gamed out. And a lot of good players have that great first year. And then once the defense or once that offense sees that, that's their job, is to neutralize or minimize that player's impact on the entire thing. So Kahlil Mack, as great as he was, at critical times where we needed him to step up in the games where a difference maker comes in, he got hurries, he got pressures, he didn't get that sack. And that micro-millimeter difference is where a player's full value to the team comes in. Don't look at the number of sacks, honestly. Look at what games those sacks happened in. Look at the weight of those games, the gravity of those particular games in divisions and so on and so forth. Close contests. I'm telling you, he got gamed out. He got schemed out. That doesn't make him a bad player. But if you look at somebody like Lawrence Taylor, they knew he was coming, they knew where he was coming, and they knew where he was going. And they still didn't stop him. And that is key. Now, when Gruden comes aboard, Gruden is about football first. He doesn't really want to deal with contracts. What he wants guys that are going to put on their helmet and run through a wall for him. And that means be at training camp. You might be in a contract dispute. Be at training camp. Do the Odell Beckham thing. He wants to know who are the people that are ride or die for him and that team and his coaching. He didn't get that. So already, he didn't feel like he was going to have somebody that's full signature aboard on this thing. Does that make him wrong for feeling that way? No, that is how Gruden is. I don't think that he cared much about anything else except getting that guy in pads. He left the rest of it to the front office. And honestly, the front office, their hands were pretty much tied. And the reason they were tied is, had they given him that kind of contract, now they're hamstrung. Now they've got so much money out there, as somebody said, 3 players on the team taking up so much of that salary. That's really hard. That puts them in a really tough situation. That's mortgaging their future into a win-now situation. And that's just really hard. Now, had they come to Kahlil Mack before they did Gabe Jackson's contract, I think we would have been okay. I don't think we'd been looking at Aaron Donald money, but I think had we been proactive for once and said, Kahlil, you're doing awesome. Listen, we want to give you this. We want you to come as a Raider and retire as a Raider. And and work that out in good faith instead of playing the old Green Bay Packer administration, Raiders approach, the whole Reggie McKenzie approach to players and contracts. Had we done that, Kahlil Mack would be there. They didn't do that. And that's on them. Now, Kahlil Mack is going to Chicago Bears, and it's a totally different defensive scheme. Because Kahlil Mack, for the most part, has been more of a hybrid player. They've used him as a defensive end. They've used him as a linebacker. They've put him into coverage. He plays a lot of different things. They've never really quite just... I think this year, under the defense that they were putting together, so much of it had Mack as a centerpiece where they were just going to let him loose. Paul Guenther's defenses are exotic and effective, and they baffle OCs. And they frustrate quarterbacks. And I think that he was lit to pop in this defense. It's probably one of the best defenses that he will never play in. That said, now he's going to be in a new scheme. I think we've seen the absolute best of Kahlil Mack. I think he'll be effective, but I think you're going to start to see his production marginally decrease. And because of that, because of all the different fits and schemes that he gets put in, I don't think he'll ever find his full motor, sadly. And he may not even become a Hall of Famer. He may go the route of Bo Jackson. Because Kahlil Mack burns strong and burns fast and burns bright. But I think he peaked. And I think he may end up on even a third team. I think in 2 years from now, you'll be looking at him on TV and seeing just a shell of the influence that he once was. And that's sad. I don't even think he's going to ride out the entire contract. I think it's going to be a cap issue. He's going to get cut. He'll make a little bit more money, and that'll be it. But he will be known for his days as a Raider. He will also be known as the guy who could have been that legacy player. I just think he's going to fall short. And I have no ill will against Kahlil Mack. I think he is just in the situation where financially he's now set for life. He's earned that money. It's just some of the other things that we all had high hopes for are gone. I do think at some point Gruden started to see that, hey, he's not responding. He's not coming back. He's not here. I need all my players. I need all my soldiers ready to go. And I think he started to see the writing is on the wall. The longer this goes, the more of a distraction it is, and the Raiders simply did not have the money or the stomach to mortgage their future. And that's it. Raiders are making some very questionable moves, in my opinion. And I think a lot of people have this take, but let's look at a few other players. I think that getting rid of both quarterbacks after they learned those playbooks and knew the scheme, I understand why they got rid of them. Because if you look and say, hey, look at these great performances, you have to understand, when you go in as a backup, you're going in against first-team defenses. So when you're being evaluated against second team defenses and you're having a great game, that's all well and good. But you have to look at the fact that when that guy goes in for Derek Carr, he's against a first team defense. And if that first team defense, if that second team defense appears in any way to stifle or stymie or bring a quarterback into bad decisions, what do you think an elite first team defense is going to do to that backup? So Gruden needed to see not just somebody that was serviceable or functional, but when he was evaluating those guys, they were against second and third team defenses. And if you're not lighting it up and exploding fireworks over those guys, then yeah, Gruden needs to be concerned. Don't forget, this was not first team defenses these guys were playing against. This was a petri dish, as it were, to see when we drop this element in, how are they going to function? So I don't want to hear that we had our quarterback, because when he said, I'm not sure, that's what he means. These guys are not coming in against second team defenses and third string defensive tackles and so on and so forth, and people trying to make a team when it's real-time game. If you want to remember what that was like, look at every time Derek Carr goes out. Historically, what happened with the quarterback that came back in? I'm going to tell you something, and I want you all to hear me. You can put a Girl Scout on that field under quarterback in place of any of those guys in any of those games, and the score's still the same. They lose. If that quarterback isn't winning in those matchups, we don't need them. Do you understand what I'm saying? It does not matter what they threw in college. It does not matter what they did in practice. What matters is that when you go out there on that field, you have got to win that game. You have got to put yourself in position to win that game with everything you've got, and you've got to step up, because at the end of the day, it's about the win. And if you couldn't do that, then you're no better than if I fielded a Girl Scout or somebody out of the stands or pulled someone out on a walker, okay? The only difference is those guys are going to get killed, but they're still going to lose the game. Do you see what I'm saying? My last take is on Donald Penn. Donald Penn should not be at right tackle. He needs to be back at left tackle. He needs to be back there as soon as possible. He just does. Yes, he was injured, but he needs to be put at left tackle until he shows he cannot do that. By them putting him at right tackle and keeping Kolton Miller at left tackle, Kolton Miller bends over too much. He goes long too many times. When he gets with those number ones, they're going to eat his lunch. They've got more technique, more experience, more finesse, more insight than this guy knows how to handle in his rookie year. And they're putting him on Derek Carr's blind side. That is asinine. You put Donald Penn, his trusty horse, on that left side until he shows he can't do it otherwise. And that's just the facts. Kolton Miller should be over at right. Donald Penn, you put him at right. Did you see what they did? They lifted him up and ran him into the quarterback first series. So the Raiders have a lot of work to do. Not to mention the Martavius Bryant draft pick, right? We've been giving away draft picks that we don't need to be giving away. You feel me? So when it comes to these decisions, we need to start making better decisions. And that's it. I wish Kahlil Mack the best where he's at. I understand the business side of things. I think I understand how it all went. I do think that if anything needs to be looked at, it needs to be Reggie's approach to player contracts at the time. And they never should have done Gabe Jackson before doing Kahlil Mack. Now, we have the opportunity in the next few years to end up with 4 first-round draft picks. And there's some good talent that's already being forecast up there. I don't believe that Kahlil Mack makes that big of a difference in the division that he's going to be playing in terms of division games. I'm also not worried about the Raiders this year. I feel like if we beat the Rams, that sets the bar for our season. I'm not worried as much about division games as I would have been even a couple of years ago. I think our strength of schedule 2 years ago was, the second worst? The second toughest? So yeah, we got slaughtered. This year, our schedule's not that bad. Not that bad at all. And there's only a couple of games that would be of a concern to me, but I have no reason to expect that we can't, even as now, under Gruden and under Paul Guenther, hit 10 or 11 in our wins this year. So anyway, thank you guys for watching this. Invite your takes. It's my first one. I'm sure it won't be my last. Ride or die, Raiders. Y'all take care.